This week, we're going to be talking about the Karate Kid and how it influenced, impacted, and entranced so many back then during that era for many years, all the way up to present day. So, without further ado, let's dive into our orchard trek. Wax on, wax off. Coop, are you ready to dig deep into a charming discussion on one of our favorite bits of nostalgia, neatly packaged in the awesome throwback movie, that of The Karate Kid?
Oh my goodness, yes. I would have to say I've been looking forward to this for some time.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
So loved. Yes. Absolutely loved the Karate Kid.
It's a good one, isn't it?
It is. Yes. And like when we give pause and think of the many memories, pop culture references and the well-loved characters connected to this feel-good film, that easily puts a smile on our faces.
Oh, I agree, Coop. Well said. And this film came out, I believe, in 1984. So, along the same line of thought you just mentioned, the year 1984,
Mhm.
you think of the many songs contained therein.
Yeah.
The Karate Kid was loaded with some rockin' tracks. Um, it just takes you back to that era, and that makes, watching this or recalling anything about it that much more memorable.
It really did. So let's get right into it, shall we?
I'm ready, Coop. I'm so ready.
Okay.
So, The Karate Kid is an endearing martial arts drama film and the first installment in the Karate Kid franchise.
Mhm.
As already mentioned, the year was 1984, and this was directed by John G. Alvinson and written by Robert Mark Kamen.
And the Karate Kid contained many notable celebrities that are most beloved and are deeply etched in our retro memories, I'd say.
Hmm.
So check out these names. There's Ralph Macchio, one of our all time favorite and most lovable stars,
Yes.
Mr. Noriyuki, Pat Morita, the lovely 80s favorite, Elizabeth Shue, Martin Cove, and William Zabka.
So, The Karate Kid follows the coming of age life adventures of learner Daniel LaRusso, who originally hails from New Jersey. His mother lands a job opportunity cross country out in California. So the two uproot and head out west, much to Daniel's dismay. So when he gets there, he deals with a few typical teenage struggles, some good and some not so good.
Yes. Daniel enrolls in high school, and again, he's pretty much a loner. But right from the jump, a beautiful blonde who also attends the same high school catches his eye. Miss Allie Mills, an upper middle class cheerleader type, also felt some boom boom in her heart for Daniel, too. So the feeling was mutual. A tale as old as time, two young people from different sides of the tracks fall hard for each other. This is a lovely development and all, but predictably, there's a little itty bitty bit of problem, which is.
That problem was Allie had a boyfriend.
That's
It's a pretty big problem.
a pretty big problem. You know itty bitty about that.
That's right. That's some real life drama stuff there, especially when you're a teenager.
Yes.
So the boyfriend was Johnny Lawrence, played by William Zabka. So, Coop, we say this all the time, but we really do love the Karate Kid.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I know we think a lot alike. So I think a few of the things that we liked about this movie was that it really captured the culture of that era.
Yeah, I
Um,
would agree.
yeah, I mean, because we were teenagers. No, 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 we were a little younger. I think we were middle school, but I mean, we were around that culture, and
Want to
like
be teens.
yes, we hung out with some teens that were actually doing what they were doing.
Yes.
So we always looked up to that. We admired that. Couldn't wait to grow up.
Yes.
And I don't know, it was just such a euphoric time, because I mean, we hated school because you had to go. It was like, okay, bread and butter, got to do what you got to do, get good grades, all that.
Yeah.
But when you think back now in retrospect of school culture, I think the Karate Kid was a very good example of picking up some of the maybe the lost components that they could try to recall now, like the lockers and
Yeah.
hanging out in the schoolyard, the school buses, the teachers, and the kids respecting the teachers. And so you can shut your eyes and think any time back then
Mm-hmm.
when you thought of school, they captured that. I thought that the culture of school and the dynamics of, like, not to be a spoiler alert, but bullying and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
that took place well in Karate Kid.
Yeah. Like you can even remember, like, remember we write our little notes, you'd pass those little notes and you'd find little cute ways of folding them up so that nobody else could read it. You'd even put for your eyes only, you know.
We were
And
so cheesy.
it really was. And like movies like this would totally capture those moments when they would have like those beach parties and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and it made us, we had like a beach nearby for us, and
Uh-huh. Yep.
we wanted to throw our own little beach party when we became of age, and it was stemmed off of things like this.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally. Well
yeah.
said, Coop.
Yes, so Johnny Lawrence was one of the antagonists in the story because not only was he and Allie together, but kind of sorting through relationship issues and problems.
Mm-hmm.
But now they've got another layer to try to sort out, and that's with Daniel. And Allie's newfound chemistry was a brewing.
Oh, again, very real. This is something that was totally mainstay back then.
Yes, yes.
Oh, them crushes were no joke.
Right.
But this apparent chemistry brewing really torqued Johnny's crank. And, he took it very personal and
Mhm.
started to lose his mind, like literally.
Yes.
I mean, so he and his friends, they started targeting and bullying Daniel relentlessly.
Mhm.
A sinister angle soon materializes in that Johnny and his friends aren't just chums or comrades from school. No, several of these buddies curiously belong to the same karate school. Uh oh.
Oh, is right. Like you said, when you mentioned that, Johnny was literally losing his mind,
Hmm.
you kind of picture like backstory, like obviously part of the story they didn't show. Like he had a dartboard in his house and he took up dart throwing and Daniel's picture up there or something like that. Because he had designs on taking him out.
He really did. It was getting
It was
serious.
getting serious. So now at one point, the movie is well in progress when, after a major fight in between Daniel and the gang at a school dance, which was Halloween themed, I think,
Yeah, it was. Hmm.
uh, the gang hand Daniel his lungs and beat the poor guy senseless.
Oh my gosh, I remember that.
I just love Daniel in this movie and was always rooting for him, hoping he'd come out victorious as he was relentlessly persecuted. My heart always just broke for Daniel. He seemed so fragile and sweet.
He did. I agree, Coop.
Mm.
Daniel's many misfortunes always broke your heart.
Mhm.
And you'd often want to just jump in through the screen and help him out big time.
Right?
But that's how real, again, well developed and real, this all too real coming of age story was presented.
Hmm.
But alas, we just had to sit patiently in utter suspense and see how it would play out.
Brutal, anguishing.
It was.
Oh, so back to this fight. Daniel is in and out of consciousness when he and a kind hearted maintenance man or gardener from Daniel's new apartment complex crosses paths. Mr. Miyagi, played by the iconic Pat Morita, leaps into the fray and saves Daniel-san. See what I just did there?
Yes.
They've now crossed paths. He's now officially Daniel-san.
Oh, you're stinky Coop. You could not wait, I know. That's cute. Oh, now to demonstrate just how bad to the bone Mr. Miyagi was, he wielded his martial arts skill and kicked those teenage bullies' sorry tails single handedly.
He sure did. Mr. Miyagi may have been small, but he was both wise as well as proficient when it came to martial arts. But the nice thing about pointing out the wise angle was that Mr. Miyagi was staunch about using the implementation of martial arts only when necessary,
Yes.
only on a need basis,
Mhm.
which is the angle of the story in The Karate Kid. You know, the school dance fight, Mr. Miyagi right then and there, greenlit, taking Danielson under his wing.
Right. And Mr. Miyagi graciously provided valuable life lessons through the help and discipline of karate in order to help Daniel to gain an edge.
The relationship between the two is one of the most beautiful, magnificent features of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The plot thickens, and it's shortly after this fight that both Daniel and Mr. Miyagi find out who the real instigator or motivator behind the gang's violent attitude is. This sinister vibe was raining down from the evil karate teacher or sensei Carice, played by Martin Cope. Now, this tidbit is interesting, but not surprising in the least, is a fun fact. Carice was a Vietnam vet and was barbaric in both his thinking and unfortunately his training, as we plainly see showcased in The Karate Kid.
Yeah, he played that part very, very well.
He did.
So was he acting? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, he was definitely he'd make you take notice of the screen when he was on it.
Yes.
So back to Mr. Miyagi. Mr. Miyagi takes Daniel under his wing, and then he makes good on his promise to teach Daniel karate, which Daniel is eager, primed, and ready.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Miyagi trains him in such a way that it is to enlighten Daniel to make the connection in absorbing valuable life lessons through intensive karate.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a rough start because Daniel doesn't quite understand what he's being shown.
That's funny, Kennard, because we know this movie so well that you can see Danielson's frustration and confusion when every time Daniel was ready to tune in to how to do some kick butt moves, Mr. Miyagi would then have Daniel paint fences, wax cars, and sand floors. Up, down, wax on, wax off, sand the floor.
On the floor.
Mr. Miyagi was simply adorable.
So after Daniel begins to pick up and master so many of the moves during his training, instead of having an unfair tryst after a verbal showdown at the Cobra Kai dojo, Mr. Miyagi arranges a fight at the All Valley tournament some months off from the official threat. So it's so cool watching Daniel fight off his issues while simultaneously battling with the sinister Cobra Kai.
Agreed, Kennedy. The Karate Kid was a film for all ages and continues to be a timeless choice for a throwback 80s movie night.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The Karate Kid is so nostalgic, appealing, fun, and charming. You know, it has a good message, as mentioned before, a nice soundtrack that we'll get into here momentarily, and some very familiar, heartwarming pop culture references of the time. The Karate Kid was theatrically released here in the US on December 19th, 1984.
It was. And not surprisingly, the movie garnered mostly positive reviews from the critics, where they praised the writing, storyline, acting performances, action sequences, and last but certainly not least, the music.
The music!
So, fun fact, The Karate Kid wasn't Ralph Macchio's first rodeo. He starred in and blew audiences away in the major film that debuted a year earlier in 1983, that of The Outsiders.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Uh-huh.
So, The Karate Kid was actually his second major film undertaking.
Right. Ralph Macchio as Daniel is truly appealing, as well as relatable in the lead or protagonist role. Now, we briefly mentioned earlier the writer of this beautiful piece was written by Robert Mark Kamen.
Mr. Kamen was approached by Columbia Pictures to compose or put together a touching film, much like director John Alvison's successful story Rocky 1976 with Sylvester Stallone after signing his same director to The Karate Kid. So, big question is, what did Robert Kamen do? What did he manage to come up with? Fun fact, Robert Kamen drew inspiration from his own life when writing the film.
See, that's one of the key factors that fueled The Karate Kid in its success and likability with fans.
Yeah,
It was so relatable.
spot on.
I just loved how some of the winning components that just work is one, the very familiar coming of age theme showcased in this film, and
Mhm.
two, the valuable life lessons that were gathered, as well as doing and properly viewing karate as taught by Miyagi to Daniel. That was such a warm, captivating experience. We had a nice opportunity to see unfold.
Mhm.
So let's talk about another key factor that made the Karate Kid enduring, shall we?
That would be beautifully captured and played out by one of the most nostalgic film soundtracks at that time.
Yep.
The musical score of The Karate Kid was composed by the infamous composer Bill Conti. Fun fact, one of the composer's other brilliant examples of nostalgic genius is heard in yet another beloved 80s pop culture memory. Do you remember the show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yup. Bill Conti was the genius mind behind that most favorite theme song for the show.
Okay, so here we go again. Like we could not wait to do this week, this topic, because this is great. This is exciting. So you just talked about Bill Conti. He did the soundtrack for the Karate Kid.
Yes.
But I don't want to go long on this because we can do a whole show on it, sometime in the future. But Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
Uh huh.
I don't know. That was a cool 80s show too. And one of the things that stuck out the most about it was the music.
Yeah. It was pretty cool, wasn't it?
It was. It,
Like
it
it had
was.
its, it gave it, it had an air to it.
It did.
Yeah. So you're watching the show and the music completely fit. It was all one big happy thing. It all just gelled well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded rich. It was talk
Yeah.
about rich people and their lifestyles, jet setting and whatnot. It made you just want to jump into your Bentley, ride down the road, and pull up beside a car and ask for Grey Poupon.
And by any chance, was the person you were asking it from Devin Miles?
Yep. Hold up that wine glass, and the other hand has the Grey Poupon. I love it. Oh my goodness, this is great. I mean, that stuff was just good back then.
It was. Yeah.
I mean, things now really don't even hold a candle to it. I don't know how to even describe it.
Yeah. There's like no lines now. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. The only reason why we're stating this is because, that is how powerful something in media is.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And and if it's done right, like all across the board, you've got what we're talking about. Like it's hard to even put into words how it transports you. It's like so enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
So, just how awesome is that when it comes to making a wonderful production? So, now we're talking about a feature film. but it's not just an old 80s film. It's a memorable one at that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's so many examples we can think of that fit the bill in being filed as good entertainment. Like the story's got to work and the characters need to be relatable and the music on point,
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so on. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
That's right, Kennard, but not about your soapbox. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool examples like Karate Kid that drives home how serious the creative execs really went all out, to dot all their I's and cross all their T's.
Uh-huh.
You can hear the musical score from the film right now. So unique and distinctly identifiable in every way. The score featured the pan flute to give the Karate Kid sound, that wonderful Asian martial arts based foundation
Mm-hmm.
as it played throughout the film, flawlessly telling its story.
Agreed.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
I agree, Coop. Um, the orchestral composition sounds every bit of what the Karate Kid was. And just as much as what we saw play out before our eyes. So there's that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Again, powerful components combined affect when done correctly. Sadly, we've seen a stark decline of this in so much of the current entertainment, and we can see it all across many areas in show and filmmaking. It's quite sad and frustrating to be fairly honest, but hey, what can we do about it?
Not much, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Go back to our beloved retro favorites as we do already and watch and organically enjoy our classic favorites like the Karate Kid.
So you own these on DVD, don't you, Coop?
I do. And this is a good thing that you're asking because that means that they're still here at my house in my own personal collection, safe and sound from Kennedy Rizzo's DVD confiscation.
Hey now. But now that we've confirmed that, would you mind if I borrowed them? I'll take Karate Kid and 1 and 2, please.
Kennedy!
Just kidding. Not really, not really. Now look, we're way off in left field and need to get back on track. Let's see. Oh yes, the power of music.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about the Karate Kid soundtrack. So
Yeah.
the official soundtrack album was released the same year as the movie, which was in 1984. And it contained many of the contemporary pop songs of the 80s we know and love from the film. Now, many of these songs we could hear easily blasting from our speakers from any one of our favorite top 40s hit radio stations at the time.
Uh-huh. And some of those more familiar track listings included in the film to help tell and drive the story was one entitled You're the Best by Joe Esposito.
That was a good song. Uh-huh.
It was, and very, very Karate Kid.
It was. I agree.
So this awesome tune was played during the tournament montage near the end of the first film. Fun fact, this particular song is totally hand in glove to the Karate Kid, but this wasn't its initial intended purpose.
Hmm.
No. Did you know that You're the Best was supposed to be the official theme for Rocky 3 with Sylvester Stallone?
Really?
Mhm. The reason why, you may ask? Well, because Sylvester Stallone was a mover and shaker for what he wanted for his movies, and he said no to the You're the Best in favor of Eye of the Tiger from Survivor.
Oh, interesting info there, Coop.
Hmm.
I love what we find out doing research. That's pretty crazy.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And given that information and what we can easily recall in our memories, how that turned out to be a good decision for both films.
Yeah.
Both songs fit both of their designated selected films.
Right. And it's interesting too how they were both kind of, you know, active athletic movies, that
Mm-hmm.
these both songs were intended for. So they have to kind of have that in mind when they're writing these, what kind of film they're writing these songs for, or I
Uh-huh.
guess maybe. I don't know.
No, that's right. It's true. They have that energy.
Yes, yes. So now that we're diving into the notable contributions to the Karate Kid soundtrack, um, one of the songs contained therein is entitled "The Moment of Truth."
Hmm.
Fun fact, the group Survivor performed this anthem for the Karate Kid, just like they also performed their hit song "Eye of the Tiger" for Rocky 3. I guess that's what one would call a win-win.
That's a neat connection as well.
Yes, yes.
Wow, wow. So now yet another song that's practically hand in glove to this film is the most nostalgic inclusion of the 1984 hit pop jam Cruel Summer.
Oh.
Yes, by the ever awesome group Bananarama.
Mhm.
Coop, this song is vibe. And although thankfully this catchy jam is included in and is a huge part of the Karate Kid, sadly it was excluded from the actual soundtrack for the movie.
It was, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I sure hate that too.
I know.
Because Cruel Summer was the bomb. Feel good coming of age song, which fit the high school scenario and culture showcased in The Karate Kid,
Uh-huh.
as well as the budding romance between Daniel-san and Allie.
It was a winning component.
It was.
I know, right?
Yes.
But a few other track listings that did appear on the 1984 soundtrack was, as you said, The Moment of Truth by Survivor. There was one called Tough Love by Shandi, Feel the Night by Baxter Robertson, and Young Hearts by Commuter, just to name a few. So if you haven't had a chance to give this soundtrack a hard listen, we strongly encourage you to do so. It's so 80s, so very nostalgic.
I agree. It's instantaneously takes you back.
Yes.
But this awesome musical contribution, both the musical score and the pop hits included on the soundtrack, brilliantly highlighted the warm chemistry that played out between the main characters as the story developed from the many different key angles,
Mm-hmm.
like the growing puppy crush displayed between Allie and Daniel.
I agree, Coop.
Mhm.
I mean, it really literally played out so well, um, especially considering this most nostalgic time period that was basically many a Gen Xer or Xennial's life experience in reality. So strong nostalgic vibes with this film, uh, which is why it's so cool to go back in our memories to talk about it. Each of the sub scenarios that played out in The Karate Kid was masterfully executed that made everything so much more enjoyable. Wax on, wax off.
So not only enjoyable, Kennedy, but amazingly believable. Hence why any given time we get an opportunity to view it, or like this week, speak of it in cool nostalgia. I mean, like, who can't like and be drawn to a story of a basic underdog, outsider teen that then elevates, to the martial arts protege who, through the kind assistance and support from Mr. Miyagi san, rise to be the alpha and true hero in the end. Bravo, bravo.
Oh, yes. And that's one key reason why The Karate Kid won over audiences effortlessly.
Mhm.
I'm so glad you mentioned this, Coop.
And because this was a warm, relatable part of the story, As fans and audience members, both then and now, we can tout it all day long, up and down, how we enjoyed this film.
Up, down.
Because that is our good opinion, and we totally stand by it.
Totally, totally stand by it.
But a huge part of this film's success was largely due to Mr. Miyagi, aka Pat Morita's, amazing contribution to it. How do we know this? Fun fact: Pat Morita was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 1984 for his fine portrayal of Mr. Miyagi. We couldn't agree more.
Facts. The Karate Kid was and would be the first of a media franchise in which Pat Morita was the central player. So there was also the Karate Kid Part 2, as well as the next Karate Kid, both of which also starred Pat Morita as the ever wise and patient Mr. Miyagi. Literally, Pat Morita works his on screen mojo where he became one of the most memorable, standout good guys in the history of cinema.
And then we think of Allie, who was played by Elizabeth Shue.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked her in this movie. I really liked her acting, period. She was always a refreshing addition to many an 80s film. Her performance in The Karate Kid was no exception, for she turns in a very strong performance as Daniel's love interest. Their developing friendship and romance was believable, and like we were really rooting, for them just to be able to beat all the odds.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And speaking of hoping that they beat the odds, it wasn't just their budding relationship they had to defend, but due to the trouble brewing from the troublemakers at the Cobra Kai dojo, the overly testosterone driven brood were rapidly influenced and coerced by the dojo master, Kreese, again played by Martin Cove. Now, his influence teaches the boys to win at any cost.
Dirty.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the understood underlying message that was conveyed as the story progressed. And also, which is why, after most nearly killing Daniel at the school dance fight, is why Mr. Miyagi decided to step in and help Daniel in the first place.
Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, one afternoon, go to the dojo where Johnny and his hoodlum friends train and learn karate. And Mr. Miyagi propositions Kreese to order his students to give pause to the unfair treatment and beatings. Give it a rest. But in return, Kreese accepts the challenge that Daniel take part in an All Valley tournament in a couple of months.
Kennard, I absolutely adore the Karate Kid.
Mm-hmm.
And as already stated, I thankfully own the franchise on DVD.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I literally can't recount how many times I've seen this particular film, but I'm always willing to give it a look see again on a good movie
Nothing better.
night.
There is literally nothing better than that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Karate Kid is a good watch. Blending humor with martial arts. The film subtly explores the importance of discipline and repetition, and discipline for developing control and power. So we then ask, how did Daniel fare?
Well, the intensive training paid off, and Daniel comes off victorious in the tournament finale and ends up winning the All Valley Championship, as well as his self respect.
He had the chance to fight Johnny in the tournament. Even with that tongue in cheek showdown to be had, we know that not only does he win the tournament, but the greatest win and trophy of them all was seeing Mr. Miyagi's wink and smile of approval at the end of the film.
Ah, yes, iconic. The Karate Kid is, as we said, the first installment of a trilogy, and it still satisfies.
Yes.
How do we know this? We Gen Xers and Xennials screamed and we've received.
Yes, we did.
So, fun fact: creative execs have really jumped in on the bandwagon on the 80s retro nostalgic craze. So in 2018, we now have the opportunity to revisit the new TV series Cobra Kai.
Yay,
It has both Ralph Macchio and William Zabka, who are now middle aged men living very current today lives. Their paths cross yet again in coincidental ways that yet again implement all things karate, tournaments, and dojos.
Oh my goodness. My hubs and I watched this. This is a good show. Oh my goodness.
Ah, cool, cool, cool.
And it's fairly entertaining for a couple of good reasons, in my humble opinion.
Mhm.
Um, One of them is naturally they capture so much of the warm 80s nostalgia showcased and captured from the original Karate Kid.
Oh, good.
Yeah. They were also good about capturing and including actual clip montages of the original film and place those in there as key flashbacks to help tell and build the story and beef on how and why eventually Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence will have to revisit karate, um, especially in training a new generation of students.
That is so cool because then obviously they have the right to do what they're doing by making Cobra Kai. That is so awesome.
It really is. This is all talk about binge watching.
Yes.
I love
Oh,
it.
so cool. I'm glad you get to enjoy
I love
that.
it.
And to add to that, a new twist in Cobra Kai is that Johnny, an unemployed handyman, rescues a bullied kid and helps to train him, Miguel,
Hmm.
who eventually becomes part of the Cobra Kai dojo, versus his old rival, Daniel LaRusso, is now a happily married, successful businessman. Sound familiar?
Uh-huh.
No, not Allie, by the way.
Spoiler alert.
So Daniel unwittingly gets thrown back in the martial arts and trains a hopeful and dedicated protege much like himself. His student, thanks to Daniel's son, flourishes in ways worthy of our favorite sensei of all time, Mr. Miyagi. Its show's tagline is The Karate Kid Saga Continues.
Oh, wink and smile at the end.
Ooh.
But Coop, I really like the flashbacks that help tell the story in Cobra Kai. But the bulk of those were from the Karate Kid, so I mean, hand in glove.
Nice.
It was cool to see the then and now comparisons and how things looked and sounded and helped connect the storyline as we continue on the fascinating adventures of Daniel and Johnny.
Oh, so true, Kennard. So I have a couple of fun facts to share in regards to the fond connection between the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai.
Okay.
Fun fact number one. Did you know that Daniel's car in season 2 of Cobra Kai is the actual same car showcased in the Karate Kid?
No.
It was given to Ralph Macchio after the competition of the first installment of the trilogy.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. That is really cool. Okay, so what else you got to share there, Coop?
Okay, so fun fact number two, just like the car Daniel acquired after completing the Karate Kid, you may find it very interesting to know that the headband Daniel wears in the Cobra Kai when he decides to train in karate again is the actual headband from the original movie,
Hmm.
also given to Ralph Macchio after the Karate Kid wrapped up.
That's cool.
Hmm.
So we got Cobra Kai versus Miyagi Do. It's sad that Pat Morita, aka Mr. Miyagi, passed away in 2005 since Mr. Miyagi was such a key part of the Karate Kid. Yeah, it was a nice and respectful nod to include him in the Cobra Kai series. There are pictures, numerous references, and flashback sequences solely dedicated to him. What a nice touch.
Very nice touch. So here's another fun fact. The musical composer who created the score for The Karate Kid, Bill Conti, His music score from the original movie, as well as some of the 80s throwback jams from the Karate Kid soundtrack, that's peppered throughout Cobra Kai.
Oh, okay. And although it's not our intention to really go long on the series Cobra Kai, the very fact of its existence demonstrates how it, as well as their strong contribution to the Karate Kid, is a labor of love for the two main actors involved. Ralph Macchio and William Zabka. It is said that their friendship and mutual bond from making the original Karate Kid is what cemented this powerful collaboration. Together, they executive co-produced it, which translate how each were dedicated and heavily involved in these creative endeavors, both in front of as well as behind the camera.
Sure thing, Kennedy. And it shows in both the nostalgia and thought put into the show.
I agree. And Cobra Kai, in my humble opinion, is a nice pickup point in gathering a believable plus enjoyable storyline that follows the original concept of what the Karate Kid was.
Mhm.
Plus, it made some of the key star teen idols back then, including, Elizabeth Shue. So I've always loved that the Karate Kid was about an underdog whose character learns to fight and defend himself and eventually becomes a champion. Literally the same storyline for Cobra Kai, just 180 to where Daniel and Johnny's roles are essentially reversed. It's absolutely fascinating, Coop. I mean, well done, and we highly recommend that you give both a watch.
Very cool.
In fact, Cobra Kai will only be truly enjoyed and make sense if you watch and really pay attention as you dive into the world of the Karate Kid.
Yes, The Karate Kid is truly one of those films that you can't help rooting for in the end.
Facts.
Yes, it's that good.
Facts.
It's hard not to wickedly chuckle at a bit under your breath when Mr. Miyagi drops down to put the Cobra Kai in the hurt locker. It's movies like this are why the strong 80s nostalgia really resonated, with many a Gen Xer or Zennials, and still holds up when we watch it again in awe after all of these years.
It really does, Coop. That is so true. I mean, I really like the fact that even though this film really dives into the realm of martial arts, I appreciate how the very concept of karate is introduced, as much more than violence, uh,
Mhm.
which is a very popular thinking of so many. Karate is an art.
Ah, yeah, yeah. And not according to Crease, though.
Oh no, he was a bad mamma jamma.
He is just so ruthless and sneers and shouts pretty much his entire presence in the Karate Kid. But even though he's a senior heavy, his honorary performance was fun to watch whenever he was on screen. But it also provided the necessary angle in good versus bad and how the training and focus develops from both sides.
The Karate Kid was a wonderful 80s film that still works and warms our hearts thanks to sincere performances and skillful direction and vision by the creative execs, which makes this film one of our nostalgic favorites.
This is true. And on that thought of warm nostalgia, I so appreciate that Karate Kid is an authentic production of its time.
Mm-hmm.
I loved how they honed in on and brilliantly highlighted how the school culture truly was back then.
Yep.
I felt like I really jumped into a time machine and experienced just how real and authentic school culture was and felt, like in that time.
Yes, almost too real. Like, oh my goodness, school, we're breaking out in hives. But the way the kids hung around school, we mentioned this at the outset, the way they hang around each other,
Mhm.
the formal and institutional, like hallways, classrooms that screamed 100% that you were at school.
Yeah.
And as we said before, the lockers and the whole potential romance, ushered in by many a puppy crush, as demonstrated between Daniel and Allie. Oh, love it.
Yes. And even though kids will be kids, and the same adage goes for teenagers, when you stop and think about the connection and shared experiences regarding the youth versus the adults,
Mhm.
although you'd still have the occasional ruffian or baddie, overall, youth had a much greater respect for the authority put in place, held by adults back then.
Night and day. Mm.
Yeah, kids and their parents, youth with school faculty, etc., which we know and realize that is far, far different these days.
It is.
Hmm.
But that's a valid perspective there, Coop, because it's that level of respect and eventual achievement Daniel-san received from coming up under the watchful care and support of Mr. Miyagi. Though had that warm respect not been displayed or even depicted, The Karate Kid would have been an entirely different film.
Which is why we're grateful to have had the opportunity to discuss this gem of a movie in detail this week on our Retro Orchard Trek. The Karate Kid was A plus.
Yeah.
So to sum it up, the casting is good, the script is good, the action was on point, as well as the direction and other creative specs worked well in The Karate Kid. Watching it is quite the enjoyable time.
And seeing it many, many times over is a testament that we enjoy this movie through and through, and that is a satisfying watch.
Mhm.
And two, a quick point to our Orchard archivers. If you're interested in checking out the current pickup show and follow up show out on the popular streaming service right now, that of Cobra Kai, you may want to, or let's just say that we highly recommend watching this awesome mid 80s nostalgic flick, The Karate Kid, first. That'll help give you a more accurate story trail for where the Cobra Kai picks up and what it's really about.
Mhm.
So, highly recommend both of these. You'll no doubt have a good time. Join us again next week for even more delectable caramel apple goodness.
Love what you heard on this week's episode? Well, the answer is simple. To tune into future treks and to the Orchard archives, meet up with us here next week. Same time, same place, in the sweet spot. And it would mean the world to us if you could leave us a shining review and feedback. Spreading the word really is the best way to grow our podcast and explore more iconic memories. Thank you.